Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidikena yopakarottam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve Patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya krimat vivaranasya cha. Now you would remember that we were dealing with the early sutras of the Sadhanapada, that is, in the printed book you find this in the second chapter. In the Sadhanapada, there are three main topics that are discussed. One important topic is Kriya Yoga, that we already discussed. The second topic that is discussed is what sometimes called Dukkha Chadurvyuha. It's simply the quadrangle of Dukkha. That means, you gradually will understand. We often try to do various spiritual practices. There are obstacles, sometimes external and internal obstacles. And what is this dukkha? What is this? That whole phenomenon is sometimes called, designated as dukkha. Different obstacles. So it is sometimes called the quadrangle of dukkha or dukkha chadurvyuha. A quadrangle with 4 elements. One is the obstacles and problems that may arise in future, which is to be eradicated. It's called heya. You find in the traditional books, you find this heya. It means that which is to be eradicated. We cannot solve the problems that emerged in the past. To make this point, I shall explain. I shall give the background. Perhaps a little bit of background is necessary to explain this. We already discussed Kriya Yoga. Tapaswadhyaya, Ishwar Pranidhani, Kriya Yoga. We also discussed different obstacles, psychological obstructions that we have to face. And we also discussed how different tendencies and impressions, vasanas, are accumulated in the mind stuff, in the chittam, and how these tendencies and impressions that may have originated with our past actions in the past lives, how they cause jati ayur bhoga, means our birth, then our lifespan, and also the various experiences that we have to undergo in this life. Whatever we experience in this life, including lifespan, and also the kind of birth that we get, all these are more or less influenced by the accumulated karmas, obstacles, tendencies, impressions that we have gathered from past life. So long as these kleshas exist, they have to be experienced in the form of the result. They will fructify at one point in future. Now, these experiences, birth, lifespan, and various types of experiences, can be analyzed from 2 angles. There may be in the form of positive merits, there may be in the form of negative demerits. Those who have accumulated a lot of demerits will have to experience things in accordance to, in relation to what they have done in the past. So among this, birth is is absolute. I mean, there is no option for that. What we are going to do in this life, there is no option. We have freedom to do or not to do. We have freedom as to how we are going to go about our duties and responsibilities. So whatever we are going to achieve through effort, there is an option. There is a possibility for improvement. There is a possibility for change. But birth itself is certain. Now, all these are discussed in the 13th and 14th Sutra of Sadhanapada. I think some of you may remember. Te hlada paritapa phalaha punya apunya hedutvat. So all these kleshas, tendencies, impressions, samskaras that we have accumulated in the chittam, in the mind stuff, have to be experienced either as pleasant experiences or unpleasant experiences. That's why it is, or you find in all religious traditions, in one way or other, a simple principle. You have to be careful what you do to others, because that will come back to you. It may not be today or tomorrow. In many cases, it will be in this life. In very many cases, it could be in future life. So this is the basic principle of ethics. Fear of God, fear of going to hell, all these things are there. The temptation of going to heaven, everything is there. But there is an underlying principle in all religious traditions. Wherever spiritual, ethical, philosophical ideas are discussed, you always find in all doctrines, in all holy books, the same basic idea. Be careful what you do to others, because it will come back to you, one way or other. So often when we sometimes encounter unpleasant experiences, we sometimes cannot explain it logically. So once we understand that it's coming back to you, something we have given to somebody, it is coming back to you in another form. There's a warning, and also there's a scope for improvement, for improving our own future. So this is a point, remember. Sadhanapada, the second chapter, deals with three main topics. One, Kriya Yoga, we already discussed. From first sutra, we defined Kriya Yoga, Tapa Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhanani, Kriya Yoga, we already discussed. We discussed Tapa, what is Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, everything we discussed. And also we discussed the avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, panchaklesha, the five important kleshas, obstructions. That also we discussed. And we also discussed how vrittis emerge, how vrittis are formed, how action produces vrittis, vrittis produce samskaras, samskaras lead to formation of vasanas, attitudes and aptitudes, and how vasanas decide how we react to external circumstances. And that produce actions, and actions again produce vrittis, the cycle continues. All this we discussed. The second important topic discussed in the second chapter is, as I said, dukkha chadurvyuha, the quadrangle of dukkha, divided into four important elements. One is heya, that which is to be eradicated. The future dukkha is to be eradicated. If we are wise, if we learn our lessons from the past, we can avoid unpleasant experiences repeating themselves. The second, heya hetu, the cause of dukkha, association between the drashta and drishya, seer and seen, cause of this association is avidya. This is from the Vedantic point of view, and this also from the yoga point of view. There are minor differences. From Vedantic point of view, the fundamental cause is avidya. We understand ourselves to be the psychophysical mechanism. So whatever affects the body and mind, we take very seriously. And that upsets our mind. The moment we realize that we are something beyond the psychophysical mechanism, then immediately the veil is removed, the truth is revealed, we understand that we are something beyond the psychophysical mechanism. We cannot run away from the body and mind that belong to us rather. But at the same time, we will have a much more intelligent way of dealing with the problems that affect the mind and body. That's a basic wisdom of spirituality. Spirituality doesn't ask you to run away from the realities of worldly life, but it teaches you to face the realities of worldly life in a much more intelligent, much more rational way. Which called spirituality is nothing but enlightened reason. Spirituality is not opposed to reason, it's an enlightened reason, this idea behind. The third factor is hanam, it is called eradication of dukkha by the eradication of avidya. This itself is kaivalya. That is the third topic in the dukkha chadurvyuha, the quadrangle of dukkha, is the eradication of dukkha by eradication of ignorance, avidya. The fourth one is hanopayaha, means of eradication of dukkha. The unbroken practice of viveka khyadi, which exists in 7 stages. We will discuss that later. So this should be kept in mind as a background. So in the last class we discussed the 13th sutra of Sadhanapada, Sati Mule Tad Vipago Jati Ayur Bhoga. When so long as this klesha continues, this klesha will reach their phala prati, phala vipaka, fruition. Whatever we have done, that action will produce an unseen potency, a possibility, which is unseen, but it will remain with us, and sometime in future, it comes back to you. As I said earlier, this is interpreted in so many ways among the Mimamsakas and also Vedantins. The simple explanation is this: whatever we do, any action, it produces an immediate, visible, tangible result. When you do harm to a person, when you try to do injustice to a person, the immediate result, the tangible, visible result is that person gets hurt or injured. That's one thing. This is at the micro level, very visible. At the invisible level, which is part of the macro, universal, cosmic effect of what we do, this action produces something which is not visible. It's called adrishtam, means invisible, not visible. Oh, apurvam, that's another word, which really means it did not exist before you did that. You hurt a person, and that act of doing harm to a person produces an unseen, invisible, but very intensely felt and experienced potency, possibility. It is called potency or possibility because it is going to take the form of a real consequence in future. So that remains, that is created. It did not exist earlier. For that reason, it is called apurvam. That means it did not exist earlier. Adrishtam, it's not visible. Now, after some time, it may act in too many ways, so many ways. It may act, this undesirable action on our part becomes a tendency and may prompt us to repeat such undesirable action. That is one thing. And again, that undesirable action may become part of the cosmic phenomenon. It's called the macro result. It becomes a cosmic phenomenon. And when you die, when you're reborn, it comes back to you. It is stored somewhere. Where it is stored, it remains there. And when you're reborn, there is a concordance. To be more precise, combining astrology, astronomy, and Vedanta and yoga, your birth is decided by what you do, according to Vedanta and yoga. If you are led a good life, done good actions, then we are likely to be born in a good family, to parents or in a culture where you can continue your good actions. And those parents also must have done some good deeds to deserve to have daughters or sons, depending upon the case, good persons to be born. If they have not done anything, any good deed, if they have done only undesirable things, then accordingly undesirable persons will be born to them as sons or daughters. It is not predeterminism. The adrashta apurva, this potency theory extends far beyond. It also extends the realm of transmigration from birth to birth. So, that is an important point. That's why the sati mule tat vibhago jati ayur bhoga. Then, the deciding factor, punya apunya hedutvad. Te klada paritava phalaha punya apunya hedutvad. That means, depending upon good action or bad action, it can impact, it can influence your future life. We are beginning with the 15th Sutra of Sadhanapada, which is very important. So that's the beginning of the discussion of Dukkha Chadurvyuha, which is called the quadrangle of Dukkha. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaga. It's a long sutra. I shall explain this. The first word is parinama dukkham. Parinama tapa samskara dukkhehi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. The simple meaning is this. Everything ends in dukkha. So there are different types of dukkhas. Dukkha doesn't necessarily mean grief or tragedy, concerns. It could be in the form of concerns, anxieties. That's all dukkha. What are the forms of dukkha? One, you try to get something, you didn't get it. It leads to dukkha or concern, unpleasant experience. And if you get something but not enough, then also it is an unpleasant experience. If it is more, then also it could be unpleasant experience. And then even if you get everything perfectly fine, the richest man also loses his sleep because he fears the stock markets may collapse any day. There is a crisis in the European Union economic, then also he loses his sleep. So all these produce some kind of concerns. Oh no, there are different types of dukkha here. The idea of quadrangle is common not only in yoga but also in Ayurveda. If you in the Ayurveda, ancient Indian school of medicine, there are 4 elements forming a quadrangle. One is roga, which means illness, the disease. The second is roga nidana, which means the cause for roga, the cause for sickness. Roga nivritti is arogya, which means getting rid of the illness. Then aushadha means the method, the remedy for this illness. So this quadrangle idea extends beyond yoga. It's found in the realm of Ayurveda also. So similarly, in yoga, what is disease? Disease is the disease of being born in this world and interpreting ourselves to be the psychophysical mechanism and being enslaved by the senses and the vagaries of senses, the vagaries of mind, and being spiritually and psychologically enslaved by the changing happy experiences, both happiness and unhappiness, like a tiny boat that is tossed about in the mighty waves of an ocean. So this is the disease that is called samsara dukkha. And according to yoga, that is also Sankhya philosophy, the way out of this dukkha is Prakriti Purusha Samyoga, which really means we now think we are part of Prakriti. We are an evolute of this dead Prakriti. So long as we interpret ourselves to be the physical body, and so long as our concern doesn't go beyond this body, so long as the least and as the most insignificant worldly sensations or problems affect our mind, upset our mind, we are just part of this evolute, one of the evolutes of Prakriti. Now, when we realize that we are actually, our true nature is Purusha himself, the conscious reality, then this disease is gone. So, that is Heya Hetu, and Hana means this liberation, samsara nivritti. That means Viveka Khyati, or proper understanding. So, the whole subject is dealt with in the second chapter, Sadhana Pada, from 16 to 26th Pada. The whole topic is discussed in this Yoga Sutra. Now we will elaborately discuss this subject. We can come to the sutra. So please remember. The first sutra, that is 16th sutra. The other begins 15. We should begin with 15th. So as a background is, as I said, Parinama Tapa Samskara Dukkhehi Gnavritti Virodhacha Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekinaha. To a person of true discrimination, proper understanding, everything is sorrowful because of the suffering resulting from the changeable nature of things. Remember, this is only for those who have Viveka. Why the world is something problematic? It's because we have attained a higher level of cultural, spiritual evolution. That's an important point, remember. The fact that we consider there is a dukkha, that this empirical, worldly, physical existence by itself is a state of imperfection, is a cause of dukkha, shows that we have started opening our eyes. So, that is a very important point, remember. That's why, Vivekinaha is an important word in the sutra. For a person of discerning mind, for a wise person, for a wise man or wise woman, what is dukkha? What is suffering? The changeable nature, the changefulness of different experiences. As I said, when we get something, we become happy. And then we are anxious to keep that happiness intact. So we'll be anxious to keep it. So we'll be concerned about losing it. And if we don't get the right thing we want, we become unhappy. So this changeable nature of different things also makes our mind a slave of sensory experiences. This is seen and interpreted as a state of imperfection by the wise person. So that is an important point, remember. We are all discussing yoga here. We have assembled to discuss yoga here because we are comparatively enlightened people. Otherwise, there are much better things for people to do. But people find time to discuss yoga. And so they find out, well, these changeable sensory phenomena, things of a few minutes, they do not constitute the highest reality. There is something essentially, intrinsically imperfect in this empirical phenomena, which come and go. So we consider this as a state of imperfection. Now, how does this really happen? There are in fact, we have to read some of the commentators to get a full understanding of this problem. Because how to begin spiritual life and how to continue spiritual life, these two problems are also discussed in this context. You find if you discuss among your friends, spiritual fellow travelers, you find most people face two types of problems. One, how to begin. Second, how to continue. Now, a proper understanding of the real nature of the empirical phenomena will help us to begin and also to continue. So there is an interesting discussion in Vyasa's commentary. Vyasa writes, Ya bhogeshu indriyanam triptehi upashantihi tat sukham. Ya indriyanam laulyat anupashantihi tat sukham. Here, Vyasa defines what is dukkha, what is sukha. Sukha is the opposite of dukkha. Dukkha means unhappiness, grief, sorrow, state of imperfection, state of concern, anxiety, and so on. Sukha is opposite. So the great commentator Vyasa gives a very, very rational, scientific definition of what is sukha, means happiness, and what is grief, what is dukkha. So he says, when through gratification, the thirst for enjoyable things, the senses are calmed. Suppose we reach a state where the senses do not seek for external objects for enjoyment. The senses are in a state of tranquility, peace, kind of inner contentment. Then they do not go out. Every moment when the senses go out, they go out in search of certain things to meet, to enjoy sensory pleasures. So if the senses are in a state of perfect tranquility, peace, if they do not move out, they do not have any thirst or gratification for enjoyment, then they are in a state of perfect happiness. And what is its opposite? Grief, restlessness of the senses due to a thirst, an insatiable thirst for enjoyment or sensory pleasure. That is dukkha. Now, this is very, 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 very important, remember. According to Vyasa, Ya bhogeshu indriyanam truptehi upashantihi tat sukham. When indriya senses reach a state of perfect gratification, calmness, they do not go out in search of external enjoyments. We are happy. That's true. When are we really happy? We feel happy when our senses are not running out of our mind. See how I can give many examples. You listen to music. If you are really a fan of music, you become immersed in the music. So all the five senses of perception and mind are focused on that. They do not run out in search of other enjoyments, things. They merge, they become one, they become identified with the music that's going on in front of you. Or if you are a fan of art, you go to an art gallery, you look at a great master's work, a classic, and you completely forget everything. Or if you are a spiritual seeker, you pray and you forget everything. If you meditate and you forget everything. At that time, we are in a state of perfect upashanti. Senses are completely controlled in a state of calmness and quiet. On the other hand, you become perturbed. You become highly disturbed. Especially when you are in a state of shock and excitement. Eyes are restless. Mind is restless. Whole body shakes and trembles. It's opposite because senses are running away in all directions. So Vyasa says, Indriyanam triptehi. Triptehi means Trishna Kshayaha. Means complete cessation of desire. All desires gone. That is true. When you are immersed in music, your desire for food may be, there will be no desire for food in your mind, no desire for anything else in your mind. When you meditate, when you pray, any of these experiences. On the other hand, ya indriyanam laulyat anupashantihi tat sukham. When indriyas, senses, drag the mind away in all directions, then you become restless. It is dukkha. In fact, the worst problem for every thinking human being is lack of mental peace. People would rather exchange everything for getting some mental peace. Now, how do the senses get distracted towards different objects? A clue to this is found in the famous text Gita. In the second chapter, the 62nd verse, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha Sangasteshu Ubajayade Sangha Sanjayade Kamaha Kama Krodho Bhijayade Krodhat Bhavadi Sammoha Sammoha Smriti Vibhramaha Smriti Bhramshat Buddhinasu Buddhinasa Pranaside. It's a graphic description of how a person's mind gets distracted towards external objects, and it leads to complete degeneration, intellectual and psychological degeneration. Loss of peace of mind leads to complete kind of mental restlessness. Now, there are two views as to how senses get distracted. This verse itself gives these two views. One is, often our senses, driven by the mind, go in search of certain sensory pleasures. That is one view. Both are correct. If you are looking for some object of enjoyment, you will seek it everywhere, and when you get it, you are caught, you are trapped. That's one way. The other one is, mind naturally gets drawn towards what is available. That is also a reality. See, often you find some people will tell you, oh, the media have no role in educating modern human beings. That's a view there. But media do have an important role to play. Media can present good things before educated people. Then there will be a tendency for people to get drawn towards those positive objects. So both are correct. Mind sometimes goes in search of what it wants, and frequently mind learns to want what is available in the external world. Now, how this really happens, Ramanujacharya is a great Vaishnavite philosopher. He has written a commentary. So he says, Dhyayodo Vishayan Pumsaka Punarabi Sangha Adi Pravruddho Jayati Sangha Sanjayade Kamaha Kamo Nama Sangasya Vipaka Desha Purusho Yam Disham Apanno Vishayan Abhuktva Sthadum Nashaknodi Sakamaha. What is desire and how desire creates suffering? Dukkha is mentioned here. So long as we have a strong desire for something, and so long as the mind has reached a stage where it cannot have peace, a little peace, without enjoying what it seeks. Yam disham apanno vishayan abhuktva sthadum na shaknoti. You are not able to live for a moment without enjoying what you are seeking. So the senses enslave our mind. And when the senses are able to enslave our mind, what happens? We go for it. If we don't get it, we become restless, we become angry, kama krodho bijaya, that the Gita says, And when we become angry, when we become anxious, when we lose our balance, slowly mind comes down. That's how mind slowly loses its sukham, that happiness, and becomes a slave of dukkham or grief. This is Vyasa's great statement. So, how to get out of this? That's the subject that is going to discuss here. Sometimes some people make a terrible mistake of feeding the mind with what it wants. That is true in education. If we know education policy, whatever the child wants, you give it to him or to her. Well, I am not an advocate of spare the road and spoil the child policy. But the point is, at one level, at one stage, we should be able to give proper direction to the young generation. So the idea of feeding the mind, thinking that mind will become happy, mind will become contented, satisfied, if it gets what it wants, is totally wrong according to Yoga and Vedanta. So there's a famous statement, Na jadu kama kamanam ubabhogena shamedi habisa krishnavadmeva bhuya eva abhivardhade. It's a famous statement. It's very interesting. Of course, this has something to do with spiritual life, mind you. Much more important. But in a way, it's just universal truth. We should never try to please the mind by supplying whatever it desires, whatever it wants. Mind never becomes happy that way. An example is given here. Suppose blazing fire. You try to put out the fire by pouring ghee or in a clarified butter. The more and more clarified butter, ghee that you pour in the fire, it starts blazing much more ferociously. It needs some other kind of thing to be put there for the fire to be put out. So, one important point that yoga philosophers, commentators, again and again emphasizes, we should be able to say no to our mind. That's the beginning of yoga, that's the beginning of spiritual wisdom. It doesn't mean that we should become over-ascetic, we should become negative. It's a chitta vritti nirodha is not a dissolution of mental faculties. It is the cessation of the modification of our sense of self with all the emerging, fleeting, changing external phenomena. That's what it means. So, it is not a kind of dry asceticism. What it means, we should be able to supply our mind with what it wants, what it seeks, but also we should be able to say no to our own mind in certain cases. That's the beginning of spiritual wisdom. Because the great commentator Shankaracharya also refers to an important quotation from Mahabharata. Yaccha kama sukham loge yaccha divyam makha sukham trishna kshayasya syede narkada shodashim kalam is a very interesting statement. So, for there's some word is missing here. Yaccha kama sukham loge yaccha divyam makha sukham trishna sukhasyete narkada shodashim kalam. The meaning is this. The sense pleasure obtained in this world and the higher pleasure that you obtain even in heaven are nothing compared to the pleasure that you enjoy by controlling the senses, by attaining a state of desirelessness. That's the idea behind. So, that's why nacha indriyanam bhoga abhyasena vaitrishnim kartum shakyam is a famous statement in Vyasa's commentary. Vyasa makes this point very clear. Indriyas should not be pampered and mind should not be pampered. we must be able to say no to indriyas and also mind. So this is the first important sutra. Now the next sutra we'll take up, that is in this particular dukkha chadurvyuha context. The second sutra is heyam dukkham anagatam. What is heyam? It's mentioned here. Anagatam, that means that which has not yet come, that is yet to come. So, as I said earlier, jati ayur bhoga, as I already mentioned. Birth is not avoidable, and lifespan perhaps can be changed, but our experiences can be modified. And Patanjali, in the same pada, when he deals with the third important subject that is discussed in the sadhana pada, that is Ashtanga Yoga, will describe the importance of yama and niyama in controlling the mind and senses. As I said earlier, mind and senses should not be pampered. The beginning of wisdom, spiritual wisdom, according to yoga, is the ability to tell ourselves no or enough at one point. How do we achieve this? For that, Patanjali has prescribed 2 sets of fundamental disciplines, which are technically called yama and niyama, which constitute the first 2 important elements, aspects of Ashtanga Yoga. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. These are the 8 yogas, Ashtanga Yoga. So these yama and niyama, these two practices, which actually include 10 different disciplines, constitute the fundamental disciplines in the practice of controlling our mind and sublimating our mind, sublimating mind and nervous system, of physical, psychological, nervous energy to a higher level. For that, 10 disciplines are mentioned. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. These are the first 5 disciplines. It's called Yama. It's universal for all people. Ahimsa is non-violence. Non-violence doesn't mean non-violence in a purely physical sense. According to yoga, even a violent thought is as bad as physical violence. Because so long as there is a violent thought in our mind, there is a possibility that that violent thought may take the form of violent action, if not in this life, next life. If not now, maybe sometime in future, in this life itself. So, complete cessation of anything that has to do with violence. That is called ahimsa. If any person practices any of these important disciplines which are prescribed in the yoga, including Hatha Yoga, without getting fully established in these 10 disciplines, there is always a risk factor. I don't say that there is a real risk, but there is a possibility of a risk in that. For example, of course, this may not apply to the practice of simple Hatha Yoga exercises. Please don't misunderstand. Here, when we talk about yoga, we are not just talking about the physical exercises part. That may have very good positive effect in terms of good health, personality, and maybe even mental peace, all that. But continued practice of yogic sadhana needs this yama and niyama. So it is said that in the Gheranda Samhita, many fundamental books stated, if a person practices even Hatha Yoga and Pranayama with great concentration and energy and enthusiasm, without getting established in ahimsa, there is a possibility that his himsa tendencies, violent tendencies, may re-emerge and become excited in his mind. If a person who is not established in asteya, means non-stealing. Complete freedom from greed, complete freedom from desire for anything that belongs to others. If such a person practices pranayama, even complicated physical postures, there is a risk and danger, because pranayama and complicated breathing exercises which involve retention of breath within, and the kumbhaka it is called, or bahikumbhaka, external retention, can excite nervous system. It can generate energy and heat, and we feel more energized. So before getting energized, we should be equipped with wisdom to direct this extra energy into proper channel. For that, we need to practice the fundamental disciplines. It's called yama and niyama. So I'm just giving a bird view of the importance of yama and niyama. But it is a great contribution of Patanjali's system to modern psychology. The insistence on certain fundamental mental and spiritual disciplines before we undertake any kind of practices, especially any practice that involves manipulating our own mind. Because when the mind acquires a faculty to concentrate intensely on any object, our power increases. After all, our achievement in life is in direct proportion, more or less, to our ability to focus mental and physical and nervous energy on one point. This is a very important point. So our success in any field is more or less dependent upon our ability to focus mental, physical and psychological energy on one point, on one focus. And yoga helps us to develop this faculty of concentrating mind on one point. So before we acquire higher faculties, we must acquire the spiritual wisdom, the spiritual poise, mental poise, to make proper use of these faculties. Again, extra energy and heat generated through practice of any of these disciplines, asana and pranayama, can also be harmful if one is not established in the disciplines known as yama and niyama. So we'll continue this discussion in the next class. Now we'll have interaction for about 20 minutes. Sorry, 10 minutes. Yes, 10 minutes.
You mentioned the importance of practicing yama and niyama, fundamentals of discipline.
Yeah.
Which is a precursor to practicing any other forms of yoga. How does that apply to every individual? How do they know all the fundamentals before practicing any other form?
Yes, even an awareness, a knowledge that we have to acquire these qualities, itself will help us to acquire these qualities. These are not things that we just acquire in a very physical way. When we become aware of the need to have these qualities, these disciplines, we naturally develop these qualities. So So frequently, there will be many cases where people start suffering from mania-depressive psychosis, and 3 types of delusions due to overheated brain and extra nervous energy generated through pranayama. See, delusions of reference, delusions of grandeur, and delusions of persecution. This often happens. So extra heat and energy generated may drive you in one direction, and again may make you enthusiastic, energetic, and out of that enthusiasm you may continue the practice in a very irregular way, without stage by stage in the prescription. Without following the prescribed method, that can result in undesirable consequences. So that's the explanation.
You see a lot of successful people, because of their desires, have actually achieved a tremendous amount in this world. If you look at wealthiest people, you look at people like Steve Jobs, sort of changed the world.
Yeah.
When you analyze their personalities, it was these desires that motivated and pushed them
Yes.
to create things that never.
Yes.
You say take away all your desires,
Yeah.
be desireless,
Yes.
the ideal state.
Yes.
Why do we even bother to exist?
Yoga is meant for those who have achieved all that Steve Jobs, Bill Gates together can achieve. Still ask the question, what is beyond? That's where yoga becomes relevant. Those who have no energy, no determination, no incentive, no enthusiasm, you should talk to them about Steve Jobs, yes, that Apple CEO, or maybe Bill Gates, Henry Ford, or Einstein, even those who went to Mount Everest. Fine. If somebody is lethargic, lazy, you tell them you should be like Henry Ford. Fine. But yoga is meant for those who have reached, who have attained all that Henry Ford has attained, or is capable of achieving all that. Still step back. After all, who practiced yoga? Buddha practiced. And Buddha was a great achiever. All these great spiritual personalities, they reach a stage where they look down at these things and try to go beyond them. But again, we should always remember, you should not expect everyone to follow the path of Buddha. It is wrong. For people in different professions, different vocations, competitive fields, we should talk to them. You should achieve. But along with this success, great achievement, also remember there is something to be achieved along with that. You need not tell them that is higher, then they may not agree with you. So along with that, should go along with it. So even the most successful person may not be always happy. The richest person may not be happy. So the rich man or rich woman fears, he is scared of thieves, so the collapse of stock markets. The man of reputation is afraid of losing the reputation. A world champion he fears that in the next Olympics he may lose his crown. So at every stage, there is always an element of imperfection. It's called dukkha. Dukkha is nothing but a feeling of want for something higher. So yoga is meant for those who want to go beyond this stage. For those who have no energy, no enthusiasm, you must ask them to be like Einstein or Newton or Bill Gates or anybody. But there are many people who have reached so much and still they step back and pause for a minute and think, well, is there something beyond all this? Maybe Steve Jobs himself did that when he was wandering in India, perhaps. I don't know. So you find many such outstanding people who have this higher wisdom. In fact, that's what distinguishes a seeker in the higher sense of yoga or Vedanta and other great people. In the Gita you find Lord Krishna did not ask Arjuna to be a yogi at the beginning. He asked him to work. And then he said that work efficiency is not enough. You should have yoga. Slowly, of course, in human evolution, you can't have the highest spiritual philosophy prescribed for everyone. But there is a spiritual philosophy for all, no doubt. You should not imagine that yoga is meant for those who have already achieved all the highest things. No. Even the most miserable underachiever can start his journey can bring about a change in his attitude and life and still practice yoga. That's the idea behind.
I was interested how you said this ability to say no to the mind, and I was curious if that.
Excuse me, once more, could you repeat that?
You said the idea of having this ability to say no to the mind.
Yeah, yes.
Is that the buddhi? Is that the intellect? Is that sort of reason quality, or how does that work?
Well, and when we attain this higher wisdom, we also become aware that our true reality is something that goes even beyond buddhi, beyond intellect, beyond mind. Yeah, intellect may be distracted as much as mind. So we may be interested in some exciting pursuits which may involve a lot of intellectual activity. So there also we may have to tell the intellect, no, enough. So at that stage, we would have transcended even the intellect level. That's an important thing, yes.
The other thing you said about this idea of in yoga, at least classical Patanjali, this idea of knowing that you're the Purusha and sort of
Oh, yeah.
from Prakriti.
Yeah.
Is there, I would assume there's got to be other approaches in yoga where instead of this separation of Purusha and Prakriti,
Yeah.
Purusha infusing with Prakriti, like a great artist or a great dancer or musician that
Yes.
uses the senses as a form of yoga practice.
Yes. Now the philosophy of yoga is taken from Sankhya. Sankhya is the philosophical aspect, yoga is the practical aspect. So in yoga, liberation means, nirvana means this attaining this awareness that we do not really belong to the Prakriti. Our true nature is Purusha. Purusha is conscious. Prakriti is unconscious, Jada. So the whole universe is an evolute of Prakriti according to Sankhya system. All the 23 principles which constitute all our mind, our 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, the empirical world, everything is an evolute, buddhi, everything is an evolute of Prakriti. And it is jata, it means it is unconscious, it is inert. So all our misidentification with the modifications, vrittis, are due to non-awareness of our true nature, rather the misconception that we are part of the Prakriti. So we should get out of this. This is the Sankhya Yoga view, but to be very precise, I would say Sankhya and Yoga philosophy reach their culmination, their fulfillment only in Vedanta. Sankhya system in many ways is incomplete. The details of Sankhya philosophical system are accepted by Vedantis, but conclusion is somewhat incomplete. So according to the great Vedantin philosopher like Shankaracharya, yoga is a great help only to attain mental fitness for higher Vedanta. When through practice of yoga, our mind gets ready and mind attains purity, and then the mind is ready for higher Vedantic wisdom. In fact, the logical conclusion of yoga is found only in Vedanta. In Vedanta, you finally realize the presence of the divine within yourself as the immanent reality, which is consciousness itself. Now, Prakriti is one of the two realities in Vedanta, in Sankhya and Yoga system, but it is inert. The conscious principle in Yoga and Sankhya is Purusha. See, in fact, yes. It is a description of the empirical world and the psychological phenomena. Uh, the details, for example, the interpretation of mind, interpretation of buddhi, five senses, are all rational. But the conclusion that the entire universe evolves out of the unconscious principle is refuted by Vedantins. So often in my classes, I gradually try to merge the yoga and Vedanta details with the Advaitin Vedantin conclusions. We don't accept the conclusions of Sankhya and Yoga, but we accept the details. That's the idea.
Came out from what? It came out also from an eternal principle, and it's not like the Shakti and Sudha, but in a way they are complemented. I mean, the change of this world, the changing aspect of this world is not so, it's maybe unconscious, but also is part of the play of the eternal.
Well, Prakriti, as understood in Sankhya and Yoga system, is one of the two absolute realities in that system of philosophy. One is Purusha, which is conscious, and Prakriti, which is unconscious. So the whole creation is nothing but a phenomenon that takes place in Prakriti in contact with Purusha. So we often misinterpret our true nature with Prakriti, and that is the fundamental flaw and mistake according to the yoga system. So we you cannot say that Prakriti emerges from something. Prakriti is the source of evolution. The whole creation is an evolute of Prakriti. So these two are fundamental eternal principles in Sankhya system. That is why you will understand the true nature of Sankhya and Yoga system only if you look at it through the prism of Vedanta, through the eyes of Vedanta, because Vedanta gives a complete system. So the Sankhya and Yoga systems are not complete systems. That's why they do not have any followers. Most of those who practice yoga are devotees, they're Vedantins. All the great teachers of yoga in 20th century, right from beginning of Swami Sivananda, who is the founder of Divine List, they're all great Vedantins. They're practicing yoga, but they're all Vedantins. Yeah. Yes. Yoga, there are two definitions. Yud Samadhu, that's a definition of Vedantins. Yoga is a definition of yogins. So it unites itself with Purusha, with the divine. So right now we do not realize our true nature because we identify ourselves with the evolutes of Prakriti. So once we stop this misidentification, then we'll realize our true nature, that we are the conscious principle. The other one is Yud Samadho. So there are two definitions according to Vedanta and according to Yoga. In Vedanta, yoga is nothing but Jiva Brahmaika. It means realization that the individual microcosm, Jiva, is non-different, non-distinct and one with the universal Paramatma. That is the central principle in Vedanta. So when we practice yoga, when we attain this cessation of vrittis, chitta vritti nirodha, which is called defined definition of yoga, at that stage our mind becomes pure. Mind gets cleansed of all other modifications, all other sense impressions and tendencies. And then we realize that the the Atman, the divine principle we are seeking is within us, and it is also the all-pervading reality. That is a Vedantic principle. So, Yoga and Sankhya is a springboard to Vedanta. That's the idea. Yes. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Purnamastu.